The incessant pounding at the door jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock. 11:37 p.m. Fear crept in as I clutched my robe, tiptoeing down the stairs. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Grandma, it's us! Please open up!" Two small voices pierced through the howling wind and pelting rain. I swung the door open to find my grandsons, Alex and Caleb, drenched and shivering on my doorstep. Caleb clung to a crumpled piece of paper in his tiny fist. "Boys? What on earth?" My words caught in my throat as I ushered them inside, wrapping them in thick towels. "Mom, she left us at the park," Alex said between chattering teeth. "She told us to come here." Caleb shakily held up the note. "Read it, Grandma." My hands trembled as I smoothed out the soggy paper. 5 scrawled words made my heart plummet. "Take them to Grandma's house." Jenna's looping cursive mocked me from the page. How could she abandon her own children like this? "I'm so sorry, boys," I whispered, pulling them into a fierce embrace. Caleb's little body shook with sobs. "You're safe now. I've got you." I marched them upstairs, bundling them into warm pajamas. Haunted eyes followed my every move as they huddled on the guest bed. "Will Mom come back for us?" Caleb asked, his voice tiny and fragile. I froze, unsure how to respond. After everything she'd put them through, would Jenna really want them back? Swallowing hard, I gently brushed Caleb's damp curls from his forehead. "We'll figure this out tomorrow. Tonight, you just need to rest." Alex remained stoic, clenching his jaw to mask the fear flickering in his eyes. At 10 years old, he tried so hard to be the brave one. As I settled into the armchair beside their bed, their shuddering breaths slowed into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Yet haunting questions whirled in my mind, dark memories stirring. My relationship with Jenna had been fraught from the beginning. The sweet, loving girl my son Derek fell for vanished after their wedding, replaced by someone manipulative and cold-hearted. Still, she was their mother. What desperation could drive a parent to abandon their own flesh and blood? A gnawing suspicion took root. This was about more than just bad parenting. Staring at my grandson's sleeping forms, their cheeks still glistening with drying tears, a fierce protectiveness burned within me. I would get to the bottom of Jenna's deceit, whatever it took. For now they were home, they were safe, and I would do everything in my power to ensure it stayed that way. As the first pale rays peeked through the curtains, I allowed my eyes to drift shut, steeling myself for the maelstrom ahead. The shrill trill of the phone jolted me awake at the crack of dawn. I immediately tensed, scanning the bed. Relief washed over me as I saw Alex and Caleb huddled together, still slumbering peacefully. "Hello?" I whispered, padding out of the room. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Sheriff Davis. We received a troubling report last night from a family at Oak Ridge Park." My stomach twisted into knots as the sheriff proceeded to recount how a hysterical Jenna had shown up in the middle of the night, rambling about voices telling her to hurt the boys. She'd fled before the cops arrived, leaving Alex and Caleb alone on a rain-soaked park bench. "We've been searching all night, but there's no sign of her." His gruff voice softened. "I know you two had your differences, but are the boys safe with you?" Squeezing my eyes shut, I managed a tight nod before realizing he couldn't see me. Yes, they're here, safe and sound." After ending the call, my hands trembled as I glimpsed the shredded remnants of my tranquil, retired life around me. How could Jenna put her own sons through such trauma? I hurried back to the bedroom, my heart clenching at the sight of them cuddled together like orphaned kittens. Jenna's depraved actions were utterly unforgivable, but what terrified me most was the possibility of far deeper depravities lurking beneath the surface. Voices telling her to hurt them, or her own twisted thoughts whirling out of control. Over the next few days, I discreetly made inquiries around town, desperate for any clues that could shed light on the dark path Jenna had ventured down. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. "She's lost her mind, plain and simple," Derek's old friend Mitch grimly told me one afternoon while I had the boys occupied playing in the backyard. "Got mixed up with some real nasty people, from what I gathered." My heart pounded as Mitch detailed rumors of shady business deals, illicit money trails, and unsettling new acquaintances in Jenna's life. "They're saying she did things, illegal things, to keep the cash flowing after Derek." He shook his grizzled head sadly. After Derek's death in that horrific car crash 6 months ago, Jenna had rapidly changed, staying out at all hours, dressing in ostentatious new clothes, and lavishly showering the boys with toys and gifts she couldn't afford on a widow's pension. The picture grew exponentially uglier the more I unearthed. Theft, embezzlement, fraud, no depravity seemed off-limits in Jenna's warped quest for wealth and status. And at the center of this web of lies and immorality were my beloved grandsons, forced to fend for themselves as collateral damage while their own mother indulged her demons. One night after the boys were tucked in, I stood at the bay window, staring out at the inky darkness. "I will burn it all down to ashes if I have to," I murmured in a voice that chilled even me. "She won't go unpunished for this, not on my watch." The wheels were in motion to expose the full extent of Jenna's deception. I could only pray I wasn't too late to protect Alex and Caleb from the worst of the fallout. The rusty hinges of the attic door protested as I pulled it down, thick dust motes swirling in the beam of my flashlight. I couldn't recall the last time I'd ventured up here. After Derek's passing, any reminders were too agonizing. But to have a prayer of protecting Alex and Caleb from Jenna's toxicity, I needed to understand how we'd arrived at this catastrophic juncture. So I steeled myself and climbed the creaky ladder. Coughing through the musty air, I aimed my light across a maze of boxes and trunks packed with decades of memories. My gaze snagged on a crooked stack of faded photo albums. With a lump in my throat, I sank onto the dusty floor, pulling them into my lap one by one. Smiling faces of happier times beamed back at me. An 8-year-old Derek, freckles dancing across his nose as he grinned at the camera on his Little League baseball team's picture day. High school graduation, his lanky frame dwarfing that ridiculous maroon cap and gown. Our tight-knit trio on my front porch after he'd moved into his first college dorm room, already looking so grown up. My chest ached as I drank in every moment, unable to fathom how that sweet, vibrant boy had become the haggard, haunted man who ultimately couldn't outrun his demons. Then the photos shifted. Derek's energetic smile remained, but his arm was slung around a pretty blonde girl with an equally megawatt grin. Jenna. I'll never forget the day he arrived home from university on Christmas break, hands trembling with poorly disguised excitement as he introduced us to his new girlfriend. How her dimpled cheeks and sparkling eyes instantly camouflaged the punkish, asymmetrical haircut and bare midriff that made me inwardly cringe. "She's the one, Mom." Derek had whispered to me in the kitchen that night as she dazzled my husband with some anecdote about hitchhiking through Amsterdam one summer. I know it seems crazy since we've only been dating for a few months, but she's my soulmate. Part of me wanted to bundle him back into his Star Wars sheets from childhood and never let him go. But I couldn't ignore the sheer incandescence radiating from my typically brooding son. So I smiled and welcomed Jenna into our family with open arms. How I lived to regret that decision. The subsequent albums told a heartbreaking tale, one of increasing loneliness on Derek's face as the wattage on Jenna's dimmed through their wedding portraits and into the first couple years of their marriage. Finally, I flipped to the last few pages and recoiled. Here were my grandsons, capturing in wide grins and crinkled nose giggles. But the woman beside them was utterly unrecognizable. Cold, hollow eyes bored into the camera. Painted smiles slashed across her taut face with all the authenticity of a circus clown. Where had my sweet, goofy Jenna gone? The one who taught me how to twerk at their engagement party? The girl who threatened to burn her eyebrows off while helping me make adorable, succulent pumpkin centerpieces for their fall wedding? Slapping the album shut, I shuddered as the revelations washed over me. Jenna's betrayal of Derek ran even deeper than I could have imagined. She'd sucked the very light and joy from his spirit long before his tragic demise last year. I swiped at the heated tears streaking my cheeks as a grim calm settled over me. Whatever drove Jenna to her current depths of immorality, her own children would not be her next victims. Not if I had any say in the matter. "This is ridiculous. You can't keep my children from me." Jenna's shrill voice sliced through the diner's murmured chatter like fingernails on a chalkboard. I stiffened as she stormed up to our booth, eyes wild and knuckles blanched from clutching her purse strap. Alex and Caleb instantly shrank back against the cracked vinyl seat. Caleb whimpered, and I instinctively tugged them closer under the safety of my arms. "Don't you dare upset them further," I warned in a low tone. "The boys are terrified of you, Jenna, and after what you pulled, can you blame them?" Her lips curled into an ugly sneer. "Oh, so you've turned them against their own mother? That's rich, coming from the woman who poisoned Derek against me for years." I opened my mouth to retort, but she cut me off with a harsh laugh. "Save your breath, Lorraine. I want full custody, effective immediately. If you don't hand them over willingly, I'll take you to court and make you regret the day you ever met me." Shaking her head slowly, she leveled me with a chilling glare. "Mark my words, you won't be able to protect them forever." With that ominous vow hanging in the air, she spun on her spiked heel and stormed out, leaving us all shaken. I clutched the boys tighter, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against mine. They shouldn't have to endure this trauma, not from the person who was supposed to nurture and safeguard them. When we returned home, Sheriff Davis was waiting on the front porch, hands shoved in his pockets. "We finally got to the bottom of what Jenna's been up to," he said grimly, "and it's not good." My heart plummeted as he recounted a twisted web of fraud, theft, and money laundering, all stemming from Jenna's efforts to siphon funds from Derek's life insurance payout after his death. "She set up shell companies, forged documents, you name it," the sheriff said, shaking his grizzled head. "From what we can gather, her crazy behavior was all an act. A way to get the boys out of her hair so she could pull off this whole scam undetected." White-hot fury blazed through me at the thought of her using our sweet grandsons as disposable pawns in her greed-fueled games. I wanted to scream, to hurl plates at the wall, to unleash the pure, primal rage burning in my veins. But I couldn't. Not with those two sets of fearful eyes, watching my every move, clinging to me as their solitary beacon of stability. So I inhaled a slow, steadying breath. Whatever Jenna's motivations, she's proven herself an unfit parent who's put them in danger. I want full legal custody. Relief flickered across the sheriff's face. "I'll make sure our case against her is airtight. You just focus on taking care of those boys." He started toward his cruiser, then paused. "And Lorraine, if she tries anything else, you let me know immediately. You hear?" I offered a terse nod, then scooped Alex and Caleb into my arms, their small bodies melting into my embrace like they'd never let go. Jenna could hurl whatever malicious threats she desired. I didn't care about her con artist scheming or her vile machinations to line her pockets with my son's hard-earned money. All I cared about were these two precious souls who had already witnessed and endured far too much in their young lives. They were my entire world now. And if Jenna delusionally thought I'd relinquish them without a brutal fight to the death, she was soon to be rudely awakened. "So you're really going to fight me on this?" Jenna's derisive laugh crackled through the phone line. "You senile old bat. I'll bury you." I clutched the receiver tighter, struggling against the flood of rage testing my restraint. "If you think I'll let you within a mile of those boys after what you've done, you're delirious. We'll see about that." The smug venom in her tone made my skin crawl. "My lawyer is prepping an ironclad case as we speak. You might have been able to manipulate the local cops, but I'd like to see you talk your way out of this in an actual courtroom." The line went dead with an ominous click. I slowly returned the phone to its cradle, steadying my ragged breaths. I'd expected Jenna's threats, expected the nasty accusations and diversionary tactics in a desperate attempt to regain control of her twisted game. But her arrogance made one fatal miscalculation. She had severely underestimated the resolve of a lifelong educator pushed to her limits. As the morning light filtered through the curtains, I studied the two tow-headed figures sprawled across the guest bed, in a jumble of sheets and gangly limbs. Bruises and scrapes mottled their arms, remnants of being abandoned in the park like unwanted pound puppies. But their cherubic faces were finally relaxed in peaceful slumber, no longer etched with fear and uncertainty. In that moment, I vowed to do whatever was required to preserve this newfound serenity they so desperately craved, which meant playing Jenna's macabre game, and beating her at it without hesitation. I strode into the study and booted up my laptop, fingers flying across the keys as I toggled between search engine results for top private investigators near me and local family law attorneys with stellar custody case track records. Time was of the essence if I wanted to mount an unshakable offensive before Jenna beat me to the courtroom battlefield. 2 phone calls and a hurried conference later, and I'd assembled an elite cadre of legal warriors ready to dismantle whatever vitriolic crusade Jenna tried to wage. We're going to rip her facade to shreds from every angle. Annalise, the razor-sharp family law specialist, assured me over steaming mugs of coffee. Money trails, witness statements, a full forensic analysis of her involvement in your son's death. She won't know what hit her. The other woman, Mei Ling, was one of the area's most sought-after private eyes, having cracked countless high-stakes cases with her enigmatic brand of perception and grit. Her obsidian eyes glinted with determination. I already have leads indicating Jenna's scam goes far deeper than just fraud. We're talking organized crime rings, money laundering operations spanning multiple states. There's a good chance she had Derek killed to inherit those insurance funds. A collective chill reverberated around the table. I slowly lifted my gaze, feeling their scrutiny. I don't care what stones need to be upturned or what vermin you need to smoke out, I stated with flinty resolve. That thing is not going to terrorize my grandsons any longer. I want her exposed for the vile, heartless snake she is, and I want those boys to feel safe again. Mei Ling and Annalise exchanged weighted looks before giving terse nods of understanding. We knew the battle lines had been drawn, and all bets were officially off. Jenna wanted to sick her high-priced legal team on me? Let her wage her war. Little did she know I relished the chance to go nuclear if pushed. And I hadn't survived 5 decades as an inner-city educator by playing nice with bullies. The tension in the cramped courthouse conference room was thicker than New England clam chowder. I could barely meet the clouded gazes of the disheveled strangers flanking my sides, members of the jury still reeling from the bombshell revelations. Jenna attempted a sickly sweet smile as she rose from the table, emaciated frame swimming in her designer pantsuit. But the wanton arrogance that usually dripped from her had been extinguished, replaced by the skittish panic of a rat in a trap. I kept my own expression steeled and impassive, fighting against the savage curl of satisfaction in my gut. We weren't quite at checkmate yet. Let's be reasonable here, she began in that saccharine lilt that used to grate my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. I never meant for things to go this far. You all have to believe I only wanted what was best for my children. Mei Ling made a derisive noise beside me, thumbing through the damning evidence portfolio. Photos of money trails and encrypted communications between Jenna and a notorious cartel kingpin. Ballistics reports tying the revolver used to kill Derek to one of the mobster's henchmen. A chilling CCTV clip capturing Jenna's vehicle leaving the scene of the accident, moments after Derek's truck plunged over the ravine. Is that so? Mei Ling arched one sculpted eyebrow. Because these financial ledgers suggest you spent over $2 million on designer handbags, high-stakes gambling jaunts to Monaco, and a literal palace in the Dominican Republic, all from the insurance payout after murdering your own husband. Jenna's mask faltered, replacing the sugary syrup with a hiss of venom. You self-righteous vultures wouldn't understand. I was trapped in a loveless marriage, taken for granted at every turn. I deserved those things. You deserve to leave your children orphaned and broke? I growled, unable to contain myself any longer. You deserve to slaughter their father, your own flesh and blood, in cold blood? Stay out of this, you cretinous relic, Jenna spat. I had bigger plans, grander wealth waiting on the horizon. Derek was a stepping stone I needed to discard like all the others before him. Besides, it's not like those boys brought anything positive to my life. A collective shudder reverberated around the room. Even Jenna's own attorneys averted their gazes, disgust etched on their craggy faces. Then I guess they dodged a pretty big bullet by winding up with their grandma instead of an egomaniacal sociopath like you, Mei Ling said, chin raised in defiant contempt. Lurching to her feet, Jenna unleashed the full force of her black rage. Nobody was supposed to dig this deep. How dare you interfere with my destiny? Those brats and their pitiful trust fund were just the tip of the iceberg. She wheeled toward me, eyes wild with madness. I hope you're prepared to suffer, Lorraine. Starting with watching your precious grandsons be stripped away once my associate's on the outside. The gavel cracked down as a hulking bailiff seized Jenna's flailing arms. That's enough, ma'am. You've already dug your grave deeper than hell itself. In the pandemonium, Annalise discreetly slid her hand over my clenched fist under the table. A small, grim smile tugged at her lips. We got her, she murmured, in front of the entire jury. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering violations, criminal negligence toward minors. The rap sheet goes on and on. By the time we present our closing arguments, she'll be praying to go away for life instead of lethal injection. With dawning realization, I glanced around at the pale, stricken faces of the jurors, middle-class Americans much like myself, looking as if they'd witnessed the devil herself unleashed on their quiet hamlet. Not one semblance of sympathy remained for the raving, unhinged woman being restrained before us. In that surreal moment, the gravity of the victory sank in. My son's legacy had been preserved. My grandchildren had been pried from the clutches of a demonic succubus by the barest margins before it was too late. And the deranged charlatan who almost stole everything from me in her quest for wealth and power would finally be entombed where she belonged, in a cage. As Jenna's unhinged howls receded down the courthouse corridor, I felt the leaden weight of tension slough off my shoulders for the first time in over a year. An era of healing could finally commence. A heavy silence blanketed the courtroom as we reassembled the following day for closing arguments and sentencing. Jenna had been temporarily removed, giving the jurors some respite from her poisonous presence before delivering their verdict. But the tension was still palpable, a suffocating dread that the unthinkable could still transpire and that vile harpy might somehow slither away unscathed. Mei Ling squeezed my arm as we took our places at the prosecution's table. Just a little while longer. Stay strong. I managed a resolute nod, scanning the crowd until my gaze landed on Alex and Caleb, flanked by their court-appointed guardian. Their angelic faces were somber, almost sage-like in their premature hardening against the realities they'd been forced to endure. It fortified my resolve to see this malignancy eradicated from their lives once and for all. They deserved the world, warm homes, unconditional love, blissful days of chasing lightning bugs and jumping into leaf piles. Not this paradigm of toxicity and reckless self-interest. The courtroom fell into a hush as the bailiff escorted Jenna inside, her rail-thin wrists encased in shackles. Our eyes bored into one another, hazel meeting ice blue in a silent clash of wills. "State your final remarks," the judge intoned, his weary tone betraying the aftershocks of the evidence he'd presented over the last several days. Jenna rose on shaky legs, painted lips pursing into a defiant sneer. "I have no final remarks, aside from the fact that this biased, uncultured backwater of a town has no comprehension of the grandeur I was born to achieve." A disgusted titter rippled across the gallery. Jenna's gaze flickered around the room before landing squarely on me, that sneer metastasizing into a look of pure, undiluted hatred. "They're my sons, my flesh and blood, not this decrepit harpy's. Yet because of your deranged witch hunt, I've been robbed of my rightful legacy, all for the sake of two ungrateful little bastards who did nothing but hold me back." Her voice rose to a shrill screech, spittle flying. "They don't deserve my fortune or my empire. I hope they rot right alongside you for the rest of their pathetic—" "Miss Mitchell?" The judge's boom reverberated like a shotgun blast, startling Jenna into stunned silence. "I will have order in this court." He turned his withering glare toward the jurors, who flinched collectively. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, as well as the defendant's own admissions of guilt, any further grandstanding is unnecessary. Tugging on the hem of his robe, the judge exhaled a solemn sigh. "Jenna Mitchell, this court finds you guilty beyond all reasonable doubt on all counts, including first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, child endangerment, money laundering, and racketeering. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole." An anguished howl spilled from Jenna's twisted lips as the sentence hit home. "No, you can't do this to me. I was destined. I was meant for glory, for opulence." Two burly bailiffs gripped her flailing arms as she fought against their restraints with feral desperation. "Let me go. I won't rot in your cages, you pathetic scum. Alex, Caleb, you were supposed to be my legacy." Our eyes met one final time across the courtroom as she was hauled toward the doors. Ironic, the woman who had sacrificed her own children in pursuit of greatness was now little more than a rabid dog being carted away from polite society. As the doors clanged shut behind her, an eerie silence fell over the room like the aftershock of a bomb blast. We all remained motionless, struggling to process the finality of it. Then, a tiny sound pierced the hush, the muffled sniffle of a child crying. I whipped around to see Caleb burying his face in his guardian's shoulder, whole body shaking with sobs of bewildered relief and anguish. Alex's jaw was set in a rigid line, but crystalline tears streaked down his ashen cheeks. In that moment, my heart both swelled and shattered at once. No child should ever have to witness such depravity, least of all from the person who gave them life. But as I pulled them both into my embrace, permitting myself to finally unleash the torrent I'd pent up for far too long, I swore on my life it was the last trauma they would suffer. From here, their worlds could only grow kinder and brighter. The spacious backyard was bathed in a warm summer glow as the evening shadows lengthened across the grass. Raucous laughter and the crack of baseball against aluminum echoed through the twilight air. "Heads up, Grandma!" I barely had time to glance over my shoulder before the battered softball whistled past my head, Caleb's voice ringing out in a peal of unbridled mirth. Clutching my chest in mock horror, I shook my head at the now 10-year-old cherub barreling toward me. "You rascal! Where did you learn to throw like that?" "From Alex," Caleb proclaimed proudly, puffing out his narrow chest. "He's teaching me all his pitches so I can make the all-star team next year like him." I ruffled his sandy curls, speckled with grass stains and sweat. "Is that so? Well, you two had better work up an appetite for those famous Mitchell family burgers I'm about to fire up." "Yes!" Caleb crowed, bounding across the yard to where Alex stood whipping pitches into an ancient catcher's mitt. At 12 years old, he was rapidly morphing into a young man, all knobby wrists and elbows jutting out at haphazard angles, yet the easygoing smile crinkling his eyes kept the last vestiges of boyish innocence intact. For now. As I busied myself stoking the grill, they resumed their impromptu batting practice, periodic whoops piercing the evening calm. Just a couple of rambunctious boys being boys, the way nature intended. Idly flipping the burgers, I couldn't help but gaze at them with a contented sense of pride and reverence. 2 years ago, they had arrived on my doorstep as skittish, traumatized waifs, their childhoods robbed from them by that soulless, vicious monster. But to see them now, shrieking and tussling on the grass with all the wild abandon of kids their age, it was nothing short of a miracle reborn from the ashes. "Grandma?" I glanced up to find them hovering at the edge of the concrete patio, grass stains crisscrossing their knees and T-shirts askew. Caleb fidgeted in that familiar way he did when broaching a sensitive topic. You don't have any other grandkids, do you? Just us?" My breath hitched slightly as I studied their earnest young faces. It was something I'd never pressed them on, not wanting to risk dredging up memories of that shattered former life. "No, honey," I replied gently. "Just my 2 favorite grandsons." Alex scuffed at the patio with his toe, jaw tightening the way it always did when wrestling with something monumental. "So you wouldn't mind if we didn't want to go by Mitchell anymore?" A pregnant pause stretched between us as my mind whirred, processing the weight of their request. Then Caleb barreled ahead in typical headlong fashion. "It's just, you're not like her, Grandma. And that name, it reminds us of all those bad, scary times we want to forget. We want your name instead, to match our real family." His imploring gaze shimmered with unshed tears, and I felt my throat constrict as the profundity of his plea washed over me. In that moment, I saw the depth of their courage shining through, 2 little warriors who had conquered more darkness than men 4 times their age. Clearing my throat, I turned to give Alex, my solemn, sensitive soul, an opportunity to voice what he'd clearly been mustering for a while. He held my gaze steadily. "Mitchell was never who we really were anyway. You're all we have, Grandma, and all we'll ever need." The words tumbled out in a childlike rush, but their impact was profound and eternal. A renewal of selfhood, an absolving of the shackles that had bound them to that venomous succubus's legacy. Crossing the patio in 2 strides, I enveloped them in my arms as my own tears finally spilled free. A kaleidoscope of memories ricocheted through me. Motherless childhood, dreams of raising kids in a loving home of my own one day, than the heartsick reality of being alone as an empty nester. Until these two battered little souls had resurrected my world from the ashes of despair. And now they were my entire universe. "Of course, my sweet boys," I whispered through the thickness gripping my throat. "From now on you'll have the family name you were always meant for. Sutherland, my Sutherland grandsons." Their answering embrace tightened with wordless emotion searing deeper than any dialect. A bygone open wound had finally mended into an unbreakable seal of wholeness. Jenna had gambled everything in pursuit of superficial glory, only to be banished into perpetual insignificance. But I, just an ordinary Midwestern widow, had reclaimed the greatest prize of all, a true, unshakable family, bound by the eternal ties of unconditional love. I never saw it coming. One moment I was standing in my living room, confronting Trent about his suspicious behavior and unexplained absences. The next, I found myself trapped in the dark, damp confines of our basement, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. "What is the meaning of this, Trent?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and outrage. "Why are you doing this?" Trent's normally warm, brown eyes had turned cold and calculating. "I'm doing what I have to, Avery," he said, his tone laced with a chilling finality. "You were never meant to see the truth." I watched in horror as he slammed the metal door behind him, the sound echoing through the cavernous space like a death knell. Panic gripped me, my heart pounding against my chest as I frantically searched for a way out. The basement was a maze of shadows, the air thick with the musty smell of neglect. I stumbled through the darkness, my hands tracing the rough, uneven walls, desperately seeking an escape. But the more I explored, the more it became clear that Trent had trapped me in this dank, forgotten corner of our home. "Trent, please!" I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. "Let me out of here!" There was no response, only the eerie silence that seemed to taunt me, mocking my helplessness. I sank to the floor, my knees trembling as the reality of my situation sank in. How could this be happening? Trent, the man I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade, had turned against me in the most unimaginable way. Flashes of our life together played in my mind, the way he had swept me off my feet with his charming smile and his grand promises of a life filled with adventure and success. I had been so blinded by his facade, so eager to believe in the fairy tale he had spun. Now, that fairy tale had shattered, leaving me trapped in a waking nightmare. As the minutes ticked by, my mind raced, searching for a way to escape. I knew I couldn't give in to despair, not when I had so much to live for. Somewhere out there, my friends and family were wondering where I was, and I couldn't let them down. Summoning every ounce of courage I could muster, I began to explore the basement more thoroughly, searching for anything that could aid my escape. The space was cluttered with old boxes and forgotten relics, but as I sifted through the debris, a glimmer of hope emerged. Tucked away in the corner, partially obscured by a tattered tarp, was a small metal toolbox. I yanked it free, my fingers trembling as I popped it open. Inside, I found a set of old, rusted tools, a hammer, a screwdriver, and a pair of pliers. A wave of determination washed over me. I may have been trapped, but I wasn't helpless. With these tools, I could find a way out of this nightmare and reclaim my life. Gripping the screwdriver tightly, I set to work. My mind focused on the task at hand. I would not be a victim, not in my own home. Trent would pay for what he had done, and I would make sure of it. As I tinkered with the tools, a sense of purpose coursed through me, pushing back the fear that had threatened to consume me. I would find a way out of this basement, no matter what it took. The old screwdriver felt heavy in my hand, a makeshift weapon against the darkness that surrounded me. I pried open the panels of the door, searching for any weaknesses, any sign of an escape route. Time seemed to stand still as I worked, the ticking of an unseen clock the only measure of the seconds that passed. With each failed attempt, my frustration grew, but I refused to give in to despair. Then, just as I was about to give up, my fingers brushed against a small, hidden compartment in the door's frame. My heart raced as I pulled it open, revealing a set of keys, Trent's keys. "Trent, you fool," I muttered, a bitter smile spreading across my lips. "Did you really think you could keep me trapped here forever?" I wasted no time in fitting the key into the lock, turning it with a soft click. The door swung open, and I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, my senses on high alert. The house was eerily quiet, save for the muffled sounds of Trent moving about upstairs. I crept forward, my footsteps light and cautious, until I reached the living room. That's when I saw it. A stack of papers, neatly arranged on the coffee table. They were financial statements, bank records, and legal documents, all bearing Trent's name. As I sifted through them, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Oh, Trent," I whispered, "what have you done?" The papers revealed a web of financial fraud, hidden offshore accounts, and shady business deals. It was all there, the damning evidence of Trent's betrayal, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. I quickly gathered the documents, stuffing them into a messenger bag I found nearby. With this evidence, I would be able to expose Trent's crimes and bring him to justice. Just then, I heard the distinct sound of footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced as I ducked behind the couch, holding my breath and praying that Trent wouldn't find me. "Avery?" Trent's voice called out, the hint of panic in his tone betraying his composure. "Avery, where are you?" I watched as he strode into the living room, his eyes darting around the space. He approached the coffee table, his brow furrowing as he noticed the missing documents. "No, no," he muttered, his hands trembling. "This can't be happening." I seized the moment, stepping out from my hiding place and confronting him head-on. "Looking for these, Trent?" I said, holding up the incriminating papers. Trent's face paled, the color draining from his features. "Avery, how did I escape?" I interrupted, my voice laced with disdain. "It seems you underestimated me, dear husband. Now, it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Trent's expression morphed from shock to panic as he realized the gravity of his predicament. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "Save it, Trent. I've seen everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with this." With that, I turned and headed for the door, determined to seek the help of the authorities and ensure that Trent's reign of deception and fraud came to an end. With the incriminating documents in hand, I knew I had to get out of the house as quickly as possible. Trent's panicked expression had told me all I needed to know. He would stop at nothing to keep his secrets hidden. I hurried toward the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. But just as I reached for the handle, I heard Trent's voice behind me, dripping with a chilling mixture of desperation and rage. "Avery, stop! You can't leave. You have no idea what you're dealing with." I turned to face him, holding the bag of documents close to my body. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Trent. You're a fraud, a criminal, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I had once loved, the charming, charismatic figure who had swept me off my feet. But that man was gone, replaced by a twisted, desperate individual willing to do anything to preserve his carefully constructed facade. "Please, Avery, you have to understand," he pleaded, taking a step closer. "If you leave, you'll be putting yourself in grave danger. I'm only trying to protect you." I scoffed, unwilling to be swayed by his empty words. "Protect me? You locked me in the basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we built together. I won't let you manipulate me anymore." I turned the doorknob, but before I could pull the door open, Trent lunged forward, his hands grasping at the bag. We struggled, each of us refusing to let go, until a sudden movement from the corner of my eye caught my attention. "Lena!" I cried, recognizing my neighbor standing just outside the open door. Lena's eyes widened as she took in the scene unfolding before her. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, her hands pushing Trent away from me. "Get away from her, you monster!" Lena shouted, her voice laced with fury. Trent stumbled back, a look of pure panic on his face. "Lena, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Lena interrupted, stepping in front of me protectively. "I've seen the way you've been behaving, Trent, and I won't let you hurt Avery anymore." Trent's gaze darted between Lena and me, his desperation palpable. "You have to believe me. I'm trying to keep her safe. If she leaves, she'll be in grave danger." Lena scoffed, her expression unwavering. "We both know that's a lie. Now, get out of our way, or I'll make sure the police hear everything." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and without another word he stepped aside, allowing Lena and me to pass. As we hurried out the door, I couldn't help but glance back at him, a tinge of sorrow mixed with the overwhelming sense of relief. Once we were safely outside, Lena turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. Avery, are you all right? What's going on? I took a deep breath, my hands still trembling from the ordeal. Lena, I need your help. Trent is not who he seems. He's been involved in criminal activities, and I have the evidence to prove it. Lena's expression hardened, and she nodded resolutely. Then we need to get this to the authorities, immediately. You're not alone in this, Avery. I'm with you, every step of the way. As we rushed toward Lena's car, I knew that with her by my side, I finally had a chance to bring Trent's deception to an end. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was more determined than ever to reclaim my life and see that justice was served. As Lena and I sped away from the house, a sense of relief and determination washed over me. I had escaped Trent's clutches, and now, with the incriminating documents in hand, I had a chance to expose his crimes and reclaim my life. Where are we going? I asked, gripping the bag tightly. To my place, Lena replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. We need to gather some people we can trust and figure out our next move. I nodded, knowing that I couldn't take on Trent alone. This was a battle that required a unified front, and I was grateful to have Lena by my side. When we arrived at Lena's cozy townhouse, she ushered me inside, her expression serious. Avery, I know this is a lot to process, but we need to act quickly. Trent is dangerous, and he's not going to give up without a fight. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I know, Lena. That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone. Lena placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You're not alone. I've already reached out to a couple of people who can help us. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Lena hurried to answer it. I watched as she ushered in a familiar face, Marcus, my childhood friend. Avery, Marcus exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. Lena told me what happened. Are you all right? I'm okay, Marcus, I replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. But Trent? He's not who I thought he was. Marcus's expression darkened. I always knew there was something off about that guy. What did he do? I quickly explained the situation, outlining Trent's web of deceit and the damning evidence I had uncovered. Marcus's face tightened with a mix of shock and anger. That son of a bitch, he growled. Don't worry, Avery. We're going to make sure he pays for what he's done. Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Lena ushered in another guest, Eliza, a lawyer friend of hers. Avery, I'm so sorry to hear about what you've been through, Eliza said, her voice laced with concern. Lena told me everything, and I'm here to help in any way I can. I felt a surge of gratitude, knowing that I had the support of these powerful allies. Together, we would take down Trent and ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. Thank you all for being here, I said, my voice steady. I know Trent is a formidable opponent, but with your help, I'm confident we can expose his crimes and bring him to justice. The group gathered around Lena's dining room table, poring over the documents I had retrieved. Eliza took charge, her legal expertise guiding our discussion. This evidence is damning, Avery, she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. We can use it to build a strong case against Trent, but we'll need to be strategic in how we approach this. Marcus chimed in, his eyes gleaming with determination. Whatever it takes, we'll do it. Trent's not going to get away with this, not on our watch. As I listened to my friend's unwavering support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer alone in this fight. Together, we would bring Trent down and reclaim the life he had stolen from me. Seated around Lena's dining room table, the group pored over the documents I had obtained, each of us determined to uncover the full extent of Trent's deceit. Eliza, the savvy lawyer, took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning the financial records and legal paperwork. This is worse than I thought, she murmured, her brow furrowing in concentration. Trent has been involved in a complex web of fraud, money laundering, and other illicit activities. We'll need to tread carefully if we're going to bring him down. Marcus, my loyal childhood friend, clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. That bastard, he growled. After everything he's put Avery through, he deserves to rot in prison. Lena placed a calming hand on Marcus's arm. Easy, Marcus. We can't afford to be reckless. Trent is dangerous, and we need to make sure we have an airtight case against him. I nodded, my own anger simmering just beneath the surface. Lena's right. We need to be strategic, and that means gathering as much evidence as possible. Trent won't go down without a fight. Eliza cleared her throat, drawing our attention. Well, I have an idea. It's risky, but if we pull it off, we might be able to catch Trent red-handed and expose his crimes to the world. We leaned in, hanging on her every word as she laid out her plan. It was a bold, daring scheme that would require all of our resources and unwavering determination. But as Eliza spoke, I felt a surge of hope. This was our chance to take back control and make Trent pay for his betrayal. "Are you all in?" Eliza asked, her gaze sweeping across the table. Without hesitation, we all nodded, our resolve steeled by the prospect of justice. In the days that followed, we set our plan in motion, each of us playing a crucial role. Lena and Marcus used their connections to gather additional information about Trent's activities, while Eliza worked tirelessly to ensure our legal strategy was airtight. Meanwhile, I found myself delving into the world of digital espionage, hacking into Trent's accounts and monitoring his movements. It was a risky endeavor, but the thought of Trent's reckoning fueled my determination. As we inched closer to our goal, the tension in the air was palpable. Trent seemed oblivious to our machinations, continuing to go about his day-to-day life with his usual air of confidence and charm. "He has no idea what's coming," Eliza said, a triumphant gleam in her eye. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved. But that sentiment was quickly overshadowed by the thirst for justice. "Let's make sure he pays for what he's done," I said, my voice resolute. With the final pieces of our plan in place, we set the stage for Trent's downfall. The day of the big event arrived, and as I stood alongside my allies, I felt a sense of power and determination that I had never experienced before. When Trent arrived, his usual swagger replaced by a hint of unease, I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. It was time to confront him, to expose his crimes, and to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. As I stepped forward, the incriminating documents in hand, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. As Trent approached, his gaze darting around the crowded event space, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the moment we had been waiting for, the chance to bring him down and expose his deceit once and for all. I stepped forward, the incriminating documents clutched in my hand. "Trent," I called out, my voice ringing out across the room. "We need to talk." Trent's eyes widened as he recognized me, and a flicker of panic crossed his features. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "Avery," he said, his tone laced with a forced calmness, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to expose your crimes, Trent," I replied, my words dripping with venom. "Your web of fraud and deception ends today." A hush fell over the crowd as they sensed the tension in the air. Trent's gaze darted around the room, his eyes pleading for someone to intervene, but no one moved. "I don't know what you're talking about, Avery," he said, his voice wavering. "This is all just a misunderstanding." I stepped closer, holding the documents up for all to see. "Oh, it's no misunderstanding, Trent. These documents prove that you've been embezzling funds, manipulating financial records, and even laundering money. Your entire empire is built on a foundation of lies." Trent's face paled, and I could see the beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Avery, please, you have to understand. I was only trying to protect you. Everything I've done for us." I scoffed, the disgust evident in my expression. "Protect me? You locked me in a basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we had. And now, you're trying to cover up your crimes by playing the victim?" The crowd erupted in murmurs, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Trent's carefully crafted image was crumbling before our eyes. "This is all a lie," Trent shouted, his desperation palpable. "Avery is the one who's been unfaithful, not me. She's the one who's been stealing from me." I shook my head, unwilling to let him deflect the blame. "Nice try, Trent, but your lies won't work this time. The authorities have already been informed, and they're on their way to arrest you." Trent's eyes widened in horror, and he took a step back, his gaze darting around the room in search of an escape. But there was nowhere for him to run. Not this time. "No, this can't be happening," he cried, his voice laced with a mix of fear and fury. "Avery, you have to believe me. I'm the victim here." I watched as the realization dawned on him, the walls closing in as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. There was no more room for his deceptions, no more chances to escape the consequences of his actions. "It's over, Trent," I said, my voice firm and unyielding. "Your reign of terror is at an end." Just then, the sound of sirens echoed through the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Trent's face contorted with a desperate panic, and he made one final, futile attempt to flee. But it was too late. The police officers swiftly apprehended him, their faces grim as they read him his rights. I stood there, my heart racing as I watched Trent being led away, his desperate pleas fading into the distance. The confrontation had been intense, but it was over. Trent's downfall had been set in motion, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. As I watched the police officers lead Trent away, a wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, yes, but also a lingering sense of disbelief and sorrow. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still couldn't reconcile the man I had married with the criminal he had become. The crowd around me erupted in a flurry of activity, people whispering and murmuring, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. I stood there, clutching the incriminating documents, feeling a strange sense of both triumph and emptiness. Lena, Marcus, and Eliza quickly gathered around me, their faces etched with concern. "Avery, are you okay?" Lena asked, placing a gentle hand on my arm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought it would end like this." Marcus squeezed my shoulder, his expression hardening. "He got what he deserved, Avery. That bastard's gonna pay for what he's done to you." Eliza nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "We'll make sure he faces the full consequences of his actions. The evidence we gathered is solid, and the authorities are already building their case against him." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Then let's make sure justice is served. I want Trent to lose everything. His business, his reputation, everything he's worked so hard to build." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Trent's arrest made headlines, and as the details of his crimes began to unfold, the public's outrage only intensified. Suddenly, those he had once manipulated and charmed turned against him, eager to see him brought to justice. His business empire crumbled as clients and partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with his tarnished name. Investors pulled out, and the once thriving company found itself on the brink of collapse. Trent, once the picture of success and affluence, was reduced to a tattered shadow of his former self. I watched from the sidelines as he desperately tried to defend himself, but his lies and excuses only served to dig him deeper into a hole of his own making. At one point during a heated court hearing, Trent turned to me, his eyes wild and pleading. "Avery, you have to help me," he begged, his voice trembling. "I can't go to prison. You have to make them see reason." I stared at him, my expression unwavering. "You had your chance, Trent. You chose to betray me, to betray everything we had. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Trent's face contorted with a mix of rage and despair. "You're going to ruin me," he shouted, his outburst drawing the attention of the court. The judge, unimpressed by Trent's outburst, shook his head in disgust. "Mr. Clark, your actions have already ruined you. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and I have no choice but to remand you into custody until your trial." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and as the bailiffs escorted him away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still mourned the man I had once loved, the one who had so skillfully hidden his true nature behind a facade of charm and success. But that man was gone, replaced by a desperate, broken individual who was now facing the full weight of his crimes. As I watched him disappear, I knew that this was the end of an era, the end of Trent's reign of deception, and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As the dust settled around Trent's dramatic downfall, I found myself standing at a crossroads in my life. The man I had once loved and trusted was now facing the consequences of his actions, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my own shattered existence. In the weeks that followed, I dove headfirst into rebuilding my career and reclaiming my independence. With the support of Lena, Marcus, and Eliza, I was able to secure a new job as a marketing consultant, using my skills and experience to forge a fresh start. "You know, Avery, I'm really proud of you," Lena said one evening as we sipped our wine at her cozy townhouse. "After everything you've been through, you're picking yourself up and moving forward." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief wash over me. It hasn't been easy, but I'm determined to make the most of this new chapter. Trent may have taken so much from me, but he can't take away my strength and resilience. Lena reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. And you have us, Avery. We're here for you, no matter what. I nodded, knowing that I was truly blessed to have such loyal and unwavering friends by my side. I don't know what I'd do without you all. You've been my lifeline through this whole ordeal. Marcus, who had joined us for the evening, leaned back in his chair, a mischievous grin on his face. Well, what are friends for? We're just glad we could help take that son of a bitch down. He's getting what he deserves. And you, Avery, you're the one who came out on top. I couldn't help but chuckle at Marcus's blunt assessment. That may be true, but it hasn't exactly been easy. Trent was a big part of my life for so long, and letting go of that has been challenging, to say the least. Eliza, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you, Avery, but you've shown incredible strength and resilience. You're not defined by Trent's actions. You're so much more than that. I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for my friends and their unwavering support. You're right, Eliza. I'm ready to move on and focus on the future. Trent may have taken away my security and sense of trust, but he can't take away my drive and determination to rebuild my life. As the evening wore on, we shared laughter, exchanged stories, and made plans for the future. I found myself feeling lighter, more hopeful than I had in months. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, pouring my energy into developing innovative marketing strategies for my clients. The more I immersed myself in my career, the more I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment returning to my life. And as I navigated this new chapter, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. Trent's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but with the unwavering support of my friends and my own indomitable spirit, I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I may have lost my fairy tale, but in its place I had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming even the darkest of obstacles. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a renewed sense of excitement and possibility, ready to embrace all that lay ahead.